My name is Clara Benson. I'm 32. Last Tuesday, my husband Daniel died of a sudden heart attack. I called my parents, crying so hard I could barely speak. And my mother said, "Can this wait until tomorrow?" We're celebrating Vanessa's birthday. That night, while they raised their glasses for my sister, I held my 8-year-old daughter, Mia, as we both broke down in silence. But what they did next was even worse. If you've ever felt betrayed by family when you needed them most, let me know where you're watching from. And subscribe to join others who understand this pain. All right, y'all. Let me tell you about how Daniel and I first met. It was our sophomore year at Northwestern, and I was straight up floundering in economics. My GPA was barely holding on, and I was ready to wave the white flag. Then comes Daniel, this super charming teaching assistant who stayed late one day to explain depreciation curves in a way that finally made sense. That moment, it changed everything. He had this knack for making complicated stuff feel easy, not just with school, but with life too. Daniel was so patient, so kind, and had this laugh that just warmed you up inside. It was the kind of laugh that made the world feel a little less heavy. We started dating that semester, and by senior year, he proposed in the sweetest way, hiding the ring in my diploma case at graduation. I said yes before he could even get the words out. We got married at 23, and yeah, people had things to say. Too young, they said. Live a little first. But we didn't want to live apart. We wanted to grow together. After Daniel got his MBA, he landed a big job at a financial firm in Chicago. He was crazy smart, but what made him stand out was how he treated people. His clients loved him because he really listened and cared about what mattered to them. For 5 wonderful years, it was just us two, living our best life. Then we decided to try for a baby. And let me tell you, it was a tough road. 2 miscarriages, a failed IVF round, and more doctor visits than I care to remember. Some nights we'd just sit on the couch holding each other, wondering if we'd ever be a mom and dad. But then, when we were about ready to call it quits, I found out I was pregnant with Mia. A total miracle. That pregnancy wasn't easy either. I was on bed rest for the last 2 months, and Daniel was my everything. He worked from home, brought me breakfast in bed, rubbed my swollen feet, and even read baby books in these hilarious voices just to make me laugh. When Mia was born, I thought I'd be the one bawling. But Daniel? He was sobbing, holding her like she was made of glass. Watching him fall in love with her right then is a moment I'll never forget. For 8 incredible years, we were the family I'd always dreamed of. Daniel coached Mia's soccer team, even though he didn't know the first thing about soccer. He'd stay up late watching YouTube tutorials just to keep up. He showed up for every school play, every doctor's appointment, every parent-teacher conference. He wasn't just there, he was all in. And now, he's gone. And the people I thought would stand by me? They're already turning away. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Daniel was in the kitchen, flipping dinosaur-shaped pancakes for Mia, while she giggled, telling him some silly joke she'd heard at school. I was packing her lunch, and he was humming some cheesy 80s song, leaning over to plant a quick kiss on my cheek. As he grabbed his keys to head out, he turned to me with that goofy grin of his and said, "Don't forget the maple syrup. The real stuff. None of that corn syrup junk." Those were the last words he ever said to me. At 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Rebecca, his assistant, her voice all shaky, barely able to string words together. She told me Daniel had collapsed in a client meeting and the ambulance was rushing him to Northwestern Memorial. My coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen tile, but I didn't stop to look. I just ran. I called our neighbor Ellen to grab Mia from school, snatched my keys, and sped off, blowing through red lights, gripping the steering wheel like it was my lifeline. The whole way, I was whispering prayers, promising God anything, begging for a miracle. But it was too late. They pronounced him dead at 11:23 a.m., massive heart attack, they said. Over just like that. Nothing anyone could have done. The room started spinning, walls closing in, my heartbeat pounding so loud it drowned everything else out. When they took me to see him, I swore he was just sleeping. His face was still warm, peaceful, like he'd just nodded off. I kept waiting for him to open his eyes, flash that smirk, and tell me this was all a big mix-up. But he didn't. The next few hours were a blur. Phone calls, paperwork, the funeral home asking questions I wasn't ready for. Cremation or burial? Did he have a favorite suit? What kind of service did I want? I didn't want to talk about caskets or flowers. I just wanted to go home, crawl into bed with my husband, and pretend this wasn't happening. But the hardest part was still coming. I had to tell Mia her daddy wasn't coming home. She climbed into the back seat after school, swinging her backpack off like it was any other day. She looked around confused and asked, "Where's Daddy?" He promised he'd come to my art show tonight. I pulled the car over, turned to face her, and took her little hands in mine. My voice was barely holding steady as I said, "Mia, something really sad happened today. Daddy got very sick at work. His heart stopped working." Her eyes got wide, searching my face, trying to understand. She asked, "But can the doctors fix it?" That question shattered me. I whispered, "No, sweetie. When someone's heart stops like that, the doctors can't fix it." Silence. Then she asked, "Does that mean Daddy's not coming home ever?" I nodded, words stuck in my throat. Then came this sound, not a cry, but a howl, a deep, raw wail that tore right through me. She screamed for him over and over. "I want Daddy. Please, Mommy, I want Daddy." I held her as tight as I could, parked there on the side of the road, while the world outside kept moving like nothing had changed. For us, though, everything had. That night, after Mia cried herself to sleep clutching Daniel's shirt, I sat on the bathroom floor and lost it. I sobbed into a towel, biting down so she wouldn't hear. The grief hit like waves, so physical it felt like my chest was caving in. When I couldn't take it anymore, I grabbed my phone and called my mom. She'd been married 40 years. She'd seen loss. She'd know how to help me carry this. She picked up on the fifth ring, music and laughter in the background. "Clara, can I call you back? We're at Vanessa's birthday dinner." I swallowed hard and said, "Mom, Daniel died this morning." There was a pause. She mumbled something to someone, her hand muffling the phone. When she came back, her voice was flat, almost detached. "Oh my goodness, that's awful. Are you sure?" I had to tell my own mother I'd seen his body, that there was no mistake, no coming back. And then she said something I'll never forget. "This is such a shock, sweetie, but we've got the caterers here. Everyone's already here. Can you manage tonight? We'll swing by tomorrow when things calm down." I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, tears blurring my vision, trying to wrap my head around what my mom had just said. Manage tonight? Come by tomorrow? My husband was gone. My little girl had just lost her dad. And my mother was more worried about caterers and party plans. I could still hear the faint clink of glasses and bursts of laughter in the background, like the world hadn't just stopped spinning. Then my dad got on the line, his voice all sharp and businesslike. "Clara, this is awful. Was Daniel's life insurance up to date? You should call the company first thing tomorrow." I waited, holding my breath, hoping for something that sounded like comfort, like love. But that was it. "No, how are you holding up? No, we're on our way. Just questions about paperwork and money." I felt like someone was carving me out from the inside. "I can't believe this is your response," I whispered. "Daniel's gone. Mia lost her dad, and you're at a party." My dad let out that sigh of his, the one he always used when I wasn't the perfect, agreeable daughter he wanted. "Vanessa's birthday has been planned for months. People traveled. We can't just leave. You need to be reasonable." Reasonable? Like grief could be slotted into a calendar. Like my husband's death was some minor inconvenience they'd rather deal with later. "I shouldn't have called," I said, and hung up. Almost instantly, my phone started buzzing. Not with calls from my family, though. It was college friends, Daniel's coworkers, neighbors, even people I hadn't talked to in years. Word had spread, and they were reaching out with love, offering to help, promising to show up. Strangers were kinder than the people who raised me. Ellen, our neighbor, came over with a casserole and just sat with me at the kitchen table. She didn't ask a million questions or throw out empty platitudes. She just stayed. That night, I told Mia stories about her daddy until she finally drifted off, exhausted, still clutching his shirt. I couldn't sleep. The bed felt too big, too cold, too quiet. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something, anything, to make this feel like I could survive it. Morning came, and with it, a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. I'd lost my husband, and I was alone. Not just in my grief, but in the gut-punch realization that my parents, the people I thought would always have my back, chose a party over me. Cake over compassion. Celebration over sorrow. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The funeral was set for Saturday, just 4 days after Daniel passed. Those days blurred together like a heavy fog. I stumbled through them, signing papers, picking out flowers, making choices when I could barely think straight. Mia kept asking if we could skip the service and just wait for Daddy to come home. How do you make an 8-year-old understand forever? How do you tell her the man who tucked her in every night is never coming back? On the morning of the funeral, Mia insisted on wearing her blue dress. Daddy always said I looked like a princess in it, she told me, her voice so small. I braided her hair the way Daniel did for her school plays, both of us trying to hold it together for each other. We got to the church an hour early. I needed to be there, to greet people, to brace myself. Daniel's colleagues showed up in droves, tough finance guys with red eyes and shaky voices. They hadn't just lost a coworker, they'd lost a friend. They crouched down to Mia's level, sharing stories about her dad, little moments I'd never heard before. I soaked up every word, desperate to hold on to any piece of Daniel I could. I'd expected my parents and Vanessa to get there early, too. Instead, they texted 20 minutes before the service. Stuck in traffic. Of course. They strolled in just as everyone was sitting down, late, loud, no apologies. My mom, drenched in perfume, gave me a quick hug like she was ticking off a to-do list. We had trouble finding something appropriate to wear on such short notice, she whispered. Short notice. Like Daniel's death was some pop-up event they hadn't planned for. Vanessa was glued to her phone before the music even started. My dad kept checking his watch. My mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but they were bone dry. Across the aisle, Daniel's brother Eric, who'd flown in from Japan, looked wrecked, jet-lagged, heartbroken, but steady. He held Mia's hand through the whole service, whispering soft words to keep her grounded while she sat there, frozen in her blue dress. When it was time for me to speak, I didn't know if I had it in me. But then I looked at Mia, so brave, so small, so quiet. I stood up. I talked about Daniel's loyalty, his cheesy dad jokes, his ridiculous feud with fake maple syrup, his big heart, and the fierce way he loved us. As I spoke, I glanced at my parents, already gathering their coats, ready to slip out before the last hymn. Afterward, we had a small reception at our house. Daniel's colleagues and their spouses stepped up, bringing food, washing dishes, handling everything without me saying a word. My parents and Vanessa, though? They sat in the living room like they were holding court, soaking up condolences they didn't deserve, acting heartbroken when they'd barely shown up in any real way. I overheard my dad by the drinks table talking to my Uncle James. Daniel was doing so well. That life insurance must be a big payout. Clara's set for life. I had to grip the counter to keep from screaming. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, just to give my shaking hands something to do. Daniel's mom, Diana, took over with Mia during the reception, making sure she ate and keeping her away from the crowd when it got to be too much. His dad, Robert, stayed late, quietly cleaning up. No fuss, no spotlight. Just real, steady love. The kind that shows up when it counts. When everyone finally left and the house was quiet, my parents stood in the entryway. "We should head out before it gets dark," my mom said. No offer to stay. No checking on how Mia or I were doing. Just a quick exit. But that night, watching Eric help Mia brush her teeth, standing beside Diana as she folded sheets for the guest room, it hit me. Grief doesn't just show you what you've lost. It lays bare what was never really there in the first place. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was sitting at the kitchen table, drowning in medical bills and paperwork, when the doorbell rang. Mia was at school, and I was still walking around in this fog of grief, just numb. I peeked through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. It was my parents. My dad was fiddling with his golf shirt collar, and my mom was checking her makeup in a little mirror. I hadn't heard from them since the funeral, just a couple of half-hearted texts. Thinking of you. Hope you're okay. Nothing real. I opened the door, caught off guard. I didn't know you were coming. My mom breezed past me like she owned the place. We thought we'd check in, see how you and Mia are doing. She's at school? Good. We can talk openly. That should have tipped me off right there. They plopped down on the living room couch, and out of habit, I started making coffee, still stuck playing the good hostess, still hoping for some scrap of parental warmth that never came. When I came back with the mugs, I caught my dad eyeing the sound system Daniel had set up just weeks before he died. Nice setup, he said, running his hand over the speaker. Daniel had good taste. He did, I said, the past tense catching in my throat. After a few minutes of awkward chit-chat about Mia's school and my mom's garden club, my dad cleared his throat. That throat clear always meant something bad was coming. Clara, we wanted to talk about your situation. My situation? My mom jumped in, swapping a look with him. Your financial situation now that you're adjusting to life without Daniel. I didn't say anything. I just waited. My dad leaned forward. Your mom and I aren't getting any younger. Our retirement fund took a hit in the last market dip, and healthcare costs are through the roof. He let that sit there, like I was supposed to connect the dots. I stared at him. You're asking me for money? My mom looked a little sheepish, but my dad didn't blink. We thought, with Daniel's success at the firm and the life insurance, you might be able to help family. Family. That word hit me like a punch to the chest. How much? I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to agree. My dad perked up, like we were hashing out a business deal. We figured 50% of the insurance payout would be fair. It'd secure our retirement and still leave plenty for you and Mia. 50%. Half of what Daniel left to make sure Mia had a future. I looked at them. These people who'd left me to drown in my grief. Who didn't show up when I needed them most. You weren't there when Daniel died, I said, my voice low. You didn't help. You didn't show up, and now you want half of what he left us? My mom flinched, but my dad stayed cool, like this was just a negotiation. Clara, no need to get emotional. It's just practical planning. And we did come to the funeral. How generous, I snapped. You raised me, sure, paid for college, helped with the down payment. But that doesn't mean you get to claim what Daniel worked for, what he left for his family. My voice broke. This isn't some jackpot. I didn't win anything. I lost my husband. Mia lost her dad. And you're treating it like a business deal. My dad's face tightened. Daniel knew the risks. His health wasn't perfect. He should have taken better care of himself. We're just trying to look out for the family. That did it. Something inside me snapped. The grief that had kept me quiet turned sharp, hot, furious. Get out, I said, barely above a whisper. My mom started to argue. Clara, please, we're just... Get out of my house. I stood up, shaking. How dare you come here asking for money? How dare you blame him for dying? He was worth 100 of you better, and you couldn't even hold my hand, the day I buried him. They stared at me like I was a stranger, not the docile daughter they were used to. My dad stood, all stiff and formal. We're only asking for what's fair. You've earned nothing, I said. And if you ever bring this up again, you won't see Mia. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not ever. They left, muttering about how ungrateful I'd become. When the door shut, I sank to the floor and cried, not just for what they'd said, but because I finally saw it clear as day. They were never the parents I needed. When I picked Mia up from school that afternoon, she was quieter than usual, staring out the car window, sneaking glances at me like she was working up to something. Finally, she spoke. "Mommy, why were Grandma and Grandpa at our house today?" I hadn't mentioned their visit. I didn't think she'd noticed. "You saw them?" She nodded. "Mrs. Wilson let me use the bathroom during math. I saw their car out the window. Did they bring something?" Her question hit me like a knife. "No, sweetie," I said gently. "They just came to talk about some grown-up stuff." She went quiet, then her voice dropped low. "Did they ask about Daddy's money?" I froze, staring at her. "Why would you say that?" Mia looked at her hands. "At the funeral, I heard Grandpa tell Uncle James we'd get lots of money because Daddy died." I felt sick. My 8-year-old, still grappling with her dad's absence, was carrying this too. I reached for her hand. "Sweetheart, Daddy made sure we'd be okay. But money doesn't replace him. Not even close." She nodded slowly, then said, "I'd give all the money in the world to have Daddy back." I pulled her close, holding her as tight as I could. That night, I called Eric and told him everything. The visit, their demand, how they acted like it was just business. Like my grief was something to negotiate. He was livid. "They want half of his life insurance? Are you serious?" "I know," I said. "I don't think they're going to drop it." Eric went quiet for a moment, then said, "Daniel told me once if anything happened to him, I had to look out for you and Mia. He'd be furious if he knew what they're pulling. That money's for you and her, not them." "I know," I whispered, fighting tears. "I think you should talk to Thomas, just to be safe," he said. Thomas, Daniel's law school buddy, had handled all our legal stuff. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. The next day, I met Thomas. He went over everything and looked at me, calm as ever. "Clara, it's airtight. Daniel named you the sole beneficiary. Retirement, insurance, Mia's trust. Your parents have no legal claim. They might try to guilt you, but they've got nothing." That should have been a relief, but when I got home, I had 3 voicemails waiting. My dad. "We need to talk as a family." My mom. "Clara, I raised you better." Family takes care of each other. Vanessa. "You've always been selfish, but this is low, even for you." I didn't call back. By Sunday, they'd set up a family meeting, dragging in uncles, aunts, cousins to back them up, like they were staging an intervention. I told Mia about it, and her eyes narrowed. "Do we have to go?" "I think we should," I said. "Sometimes you face things head on." She thought for a second. "Okay. Can I bring something?" "What kind of something?" "A message," she said, "from me and Daddy." That night, she holed up in her room for hours, colored pencils and paper everywhere, refusing to let me see. "It's a surprise," she whispered, "but it's important." Sunday afternoon, we pulled up to my childhood home. My parents greeted us, dressed like they were off to church, their faces all stiff and rehearsed. Inside, the living room was set up like a courtroom, chairs in a circle, my dad in his recliner like a judge. Vanessa lounged on the couch arm, scrolling her phone. My aunts and uncles looked uneasy, like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Clara," my dad started. "Thanks for coming. We have important matters to discuss." I stayed standing. "Whatever you've got to say it in front of Mia. She deserves to know what's going on with her family." My mom frowned. "This isn't appropriate for a child." "If it's not okay for her to hear, it's not okay for you to say." My dad sighed. "We've looked at our finances. Your mom and I aren't getting younger, and Vanessa's been struggling. Given the windfall from Daniel's passing." He handed me a spreadsheet, like it was a business pitch. "This outlines a fair distribution. 50% for us, 15% for Vanessa, the rest for you and Mia." I didn't even glance at it. I looked around at everyone they'd roped into this. You want 65% of the money Daniel left for his daughter? Vanessa finally put her phone down. It's fair. We're struggling while you're suddenly rich. Then Mia stood up, clutching the manila envelope she'd held all morning. I have something to say. Everyone turned to her. My mom tried a fake smile. Sweetheart, the adults are talking. No, Mia cut in. This is about Daddy, so it's about me too. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, covered in crayons and marker. It wasn't just a drawing. It was an invoice. At the top, in her careful handwriting, bill for real love and support. She read aloud. Being there when Daddy died. $0, not provided. Helping Mommy when she was sad. $0, not provided. Hugging me when I cried. $0, not provided. Being real grandparents, priceless, not delivered. Total, $0. She looked at my parents. This is what you earned. The room went dead silent. My dad's hands shook as he held the paper. My mom started crying, but I couldn't tell if it was shame or just another act. Vanessa looked stunned. I stepped beside Mia and took her hand. We're done here. Don't contact us unless it's to apologize and mean it. Mia deserves better grandparents than you've been, and I deserve better parents. We walked out, not just from their house, but from the hold they'd had on us for too long. That night, Mia and I spread out on the living room floor with a pizza box between us. Just us two. She was in her star-covered pajamas, hair still damp from her bath, giggling at some cartoon on the TV. I watched her, the way her eyes crinkled just like Daniel's, and thought, this is enough. This moment, this quiet, this freedom from everyone else's expectations. After she dozed off in my lap, I stayed up, scrolling through old voicemails. Not chasing closure, just wanting to hear Daniel's voice again. One about picking up milk. Another with him humming a goofy jingle he'd made up. Then one that stopped me cold. You're stronger than you know. I love you. I didn't cry. I smiled. The next morning, I threw open every window in the house. Let the fresh air in. Let the weight of the past slip out. I called our lawyer and redid my will, making sure every cent went to Mia, exactly as Daniel would have wanted. No gaps, no cracks for anyone to weasel through. Then I changed the locks. I deleted old numbers, blocked new ones. I started saying no. No to guilt trips. No to playing nice just to keep things civil. No to holding on to peace that was already shattered. A week later, I signed Mia up for a kids' grief support group. She was nervous that first day, squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. By the third session, she walked in on her own. We started taking weekend hikes, crunching through leaves, letting the world feel big again. Once a month, we volunteered at an animal shelter, something Daniel always wanted us to do together. One Sunday morning, over pancakes, Mia looked at me and asked, "We're doing okay, right?" I nodded. We are. But the past doesn't just vanish. One afternoon, a letter showed up, no return address, but I knew my mom's handwriting. I held it for hours before I could open it. Just one line on a single sheet. We still believe you owe us. No apology, no remorse. I fed it to the shredder, watching it turn to confetti with the eggshells and coffee grounds in the trash. Done. That night, I watched Mia sleep, her little chest rising and falling. And I knew one thing for certain. I didn't owe anybody anything anymore. Not my parents, not Vanessa, not the version of myself I'd twisted into to survive them. What I did owe was to Mia, a safe home. A mom who chose her every single day. A legacy built on strength, not silence. A month later, my phone rang with a call I wasn't expecting. It was Daniel's uncle, James, the executor of his mom's estate. Clara, we're having a formal will reading next Thursday. You and Mia need to be there. I blinked, confused. Daniel's mom passed over a year ago. I know, he said. Some clauses needed time to settle. Trust me, you'll want to come. I almost skipped it. I was so done with family drama, with surprises that felt like traps. but something in his voice told me this was different. When Mia and I walked into the lawyer's office, the room was already packed. Vanessa sat there, arms crossed, ready for a fight. My parents were in the corner, whispering heatedly, clearly thrown off by our presence. James gave Mia a warm smile and handed her a small velvet pouch. "This is from your grandma. She said you were the only one who ever made her feel truly seen." Mia opened it and found a delicate gold locket with a tiny photo of her and Daniel inside. She clutched it to her chest, silent, but holding on tight. The lawyer came in, sat down, and opened the envelope with a crisp, formal air. He started reading. "To my children, I leave the memories they refused to create with me. To my grandchildren, I leave the warmth they never shared. And to my daughter-in-law, Clara, I leave the legacy that should have been mine, because she earned it more than any of my own blood ever did." The room felt like it tilted. The lawyer kept going. "To Clara Benson and her daughter Mia, I bequeath the entirety of my estate. This includes the family home in Connecticut, the trust accounts, all personal assets, and the art collection appraised at $1.2 million. Nothing is to be distributed to my son or daughter. This is final." My mom gasped. Vanessa shot up. "That's not legal." She was old. She was confused. The lawyer didn't flinch. "It's legal." She was fully competent. "The documents are airtight and witnessed. You can contest it, but I'd think twice about the legal fees." My dad's face was like stone. Not a word. My mom was shaking. Vanessa stormed out, slamming the door like a sulky teenager. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry or broken. I felt vindicated. That evening, I sat on the porch of the Connecticut house we now owned, watching Mia run around with the rescue dog James had gotten her. She was wearing the locket, its gold catching the light. The breeze was gentle, the sky glowing pink with a whisper of something new. I realized justice doesn't always show up when you're begging for it. Sometimes it waits until the tears have stopped, the wounds have scarred over, and the people who hurt you have shown their true colors. But when it comes, when the scales finally balance, it's not just satisfying, it's healing. I didn't get the love I deserved from my parents, but I poured it into Mia. I protected what Daniel left for us. That's my legacy. Not revenge or bitterness, but a peace we fought hard to claim. Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiving those who hurt you. Sometimes it's about walking away, choosing yourself, choosing your child, choosing a future where silence isn't mistaken for love. I never got closure from my parents. They didn't apologize. They didn't change. But I did. I stopped waiting for them to become the parents I needed. I stopped making myself small to prop others up. I stopped thinking obligation was the same as love. And from that, I built something better. Not perfect, not always easy, but real. Mia and I still have tough days. Some nights, she asks questions I don't have answers for. But we face them together. We talk, we cry, we grow. And sometimes we sit on that creaky porch swing in Connecticut, staring at the stars, and she'll say, "Daddy would be proud of us." I believe her. Because even in death, Daniel gave us something no one could take away. Not just a house or money, but a truth. Real love protects. It stands firm, and it never demands a price tag. We started new traditions. Every Saturday we bake cookies, using Daniel's old recipe, the one he swore was better than any bakeries. Mia measures the flour, and I sneak in extra chocolate chips when she's not looking. We laugh, we make a mess, and for a moment it feels like he's there with us. I went back to work part-time, teaching art classes at the community center. It's not glamorous, but it's mine, and it lets me be there when Mia gets home from school. She's thriving, painting these wild, colorful canvases that remind me of Daniel's spirit. Her grief group helped her find words for the pain, and now she's helping other kids do the same. One evening, as we were planting flowers in the garden of our new home, Mia looked up at me. "Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever say sorry?" I paused, brushing dirt off my hands. "I don't know, sweetie. But we don't need their apology to be okay. We've got each other, and that's enough. She nodded, planting a marigold with care, and I saw it in her. A strength that was hers, not borrowed or demanded. The letters from my parents stopped after a while. I heard through a cousin they're telling people I stole their inheritance, painting themselves as victims. I don't correct the story. I don't need to. Those who matter, Eric, Diana, Robert, our neighbors, Mia's teachers, they know the truth. They show up for us, not with expectations, but with love. That's the family we've chosen, the one we're building. So I figured shutting the door on my family would finally put an end to all the drama. Turns out, I'd only closed the curtain on the first act of this wild show. It was just another Tuesday morning. Mia was at the kitchen table, her little feet swinging as she shoveled cereal into her mouth. I was tossing together her lunch, half listening to the weather report on the radio, half wondering if I could squeeze in a quick hair wash before the school drop-off. You know, the usual mom hustle. Everything felt calm, normal, like any other day. Then came the knock. It wasn't a friendly tap. Oh no, it was one of those firm, no-nonsense knocks that makes your stomach do a little flip. I opened the door, and there stood this guy in a navy blazer, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He held out a sealed envelope. "Clara Benson?" he asked, his voice all business. "That's me," I said, already feeling a prickle of unease. "You've been served," he replied, flat as a pancake, handing me the envelope before turning and walking off. Didn't even give me a chance to process. I just stood there in the doorway, barefoot, my breath catching like I'd been sucker punched. The envelope felt heavy, cold in my hands. Not the kind of cold you get from a chilly morning, but the kind that comes from straight-up dread. I tore it open right there, too curious and too nervous to wait. And there it was. A lawsuit. My sister Vanessa was dragging me to court. She was claiming I'd manipulated our sweet late grandma, tricked her into changing her will, and snatched up the inheritance meant for me and Mia. I didn't even notice how hard I was gripping the papers until the edge sliced into my thumb. Vanessa, the same sister who called me a walking sob story at Daniel's funeral. The one who vanished the second real grief showed up, like it was too much for her to handle. And now, here she was, back with a vengeance, gunning for what wasn't even hers. I wandered back to the kitchen in a fog. "Mom?" Mia's voice snapped me out of it. She was staring at me, her big eyes full of worry. "Why are you shaking?" I forced a smile, shaking my head. "Just something unexpected, sweetie." But my hands wouldn't stop trembling, because I knew Vanessa. This wasn't just about the money. Oh no, this was about control. Revenge. About making me pay for stepping away from the toxic family script they all clung to like a lifeline. I glanced out the window, the lawsuit still clutched in my hand. They didn't show up when we were drowning in grief. But now? Now they were here, ready to fight for the cash. And I knew, deep down, I was in for another battle. Not just for the inheritance, but for the truth. 2 days after that bombshell lawsuit landed in my hands, I got the first hint that Vanessa was playing dirty. I was curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone, just trying to zone out with some local news and parenting group chatter. You know, the usual escape from a long day. Then, out of nowhere, my full name stared back at me in a headline. "Wife of late Daniel Benson accused of manipulating elderly woman's will." There was a picture of me from 3 years ago at a charity gala, smiling next to Daniel, holding up a paddle for the silent auction. I looked happy, clueless about the storm coming. And right below it, a quote that hit like a slap. "She took advantage of a grieving old woman. Now she's stealing from her own family." Signed, Vanessa R. My stomach twisted into knots. Vanessa didn't just file a lawsuit. She went straight to the press, spinning a story that made me out to be some scheming widow who preyed on our sweet grandma in her final days, convincing her to rewrite her will. The article practically screamed that I was hiding something shady. I read it over and over until the words started swimming. Then, like a glutton for punishment, I opened the comments. Big mistake. Strangers were tearing me apart, calling me a gold digger, a snake, and worse. Some even tagged me as school, demanding they protect the other kids. My heart stopped. Mia's only 11. She doesn't even know what a will is, let alone why kids were whispering about her in the school halls. That evening, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, all distorted and creepy, said, "You won't win this. You might have fooled an old lady, but you won't fool a judge." Then, click, dead air. It felt like someone had snuck into my life and started yanking at the strings, unraveling everything. Vanessa? Radio silence. No response to my texts, no direct contact. She let her lawyers and the media do the dirty work. Typical Vanessa, always keeping her hands clean while stirring up chaos. I called James, our old attorney who helped sort out Daniel's estate. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said, his voice heavy. "They're coming for your reputation now. It's a classic move to shake you up, push you to settle fast." "No way I'm settling," I shot back, not even thinking twice. "Didn't think you would," he said with a small chuckle. "But if we're fighting this, we need more than your side of the story. We need to figure out why Vanessa's doing this. What's she hiding?" That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. What if this wasn't about the will at all? What if Vanessa wasn't just clawing for what she thinks is hers? What if she's fighting to keep something buried, something she doesn't want anyone to dig up? It had been over 6 months since I last talked to James. Not since he handed me the final stack of papers for Daniel's estate, looked me in the eye and said, "If you ever need anything, Clara, you know where to find me." I never thought I'd actually have to call him again. But there I was, at 2 a.m., hands shaking, heart pounding like a drum, dialing his number after that awful article, that creepy voicemail, and Vanessa's wall of silence. To my shock, he picked up. "Clara?" His voice was groggy but sharp, like he'd snapped awake. "Is Mia okay?" "Mia's fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's me who's falling apart." There was a beat of silence, then, softly, "Tell me everything." So I did. I spilled it all. The article, the voicemail, the lawsuit, how it all felt like some twisted, calculated plan. When I finished, James didn't say anything for what felt like forever. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't want to bring this up unless I had to, but Vanessa's hired Grayson and Howe." I blinked, confused. "The corporate firm?" "They're not just corporate anymore. They've got a whole department now that specializes in, well, let's call it tearing reputations to shreds. They hit you from the outside. Media, public opinion, pressure campaigns. It's not about the law, it's about control." My stomach churned. "So they're trying to make me look guilty before I even get to court?" "Exactly." I felt sick, like the ground was slipping out from under me. James lowered his voice. "Clara, I've gone up against them before. You need to watch who you trust right now. This won't just stay in the courtroom. They're probably already digging through your life, looking for anything they can twist." My mind raced to every vulnerable moment I'd ever shared. The blog posts I wrote after Daniel died. The photos I posted online. Even the grief support forum where I poured my heart out. I felt so exposed, like my whole life was laid bare for them to pick apart. "You're going to need more than a solid defense," James went on. "You need something they won't see coming. A reason." That's when it hit me. A memory from a year ago, when Daniel and I visited his grandma just before her health took a nosedive. She'd pulled me aside in the hallway, her voice low, almost like she was confessing something. "Vanessa keeps asking about the old will," she'd whispered. "I don't trust her, Clara. She's too eager." Back then, I brushed it off as paranoia, maybe just her age or grief talking. But now, it felt like a clue I'd been too distracted to notice. "I think there's more to this," I told James, my voice slow but firm. "I think Vanessa's been planning this for a long time, maybe even before Daniel passed." There was a pause on the line. Then James said, "If that's true, we need proof." "Something solid. Emails, witnesses, anyone who saw her pushing." I'll find it, I promised. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about digging up the truth and shining a light on whatever Vanessa was trying so hard to hide. It all started with this nagging feeling, like a whisper in the back of my mind that just wouldn't shut up. The more I thought about it, the louder it got. Vanessa's sudden obsession with Grandma Rose's estate had seemed to come out of nowhere. Or at least, that's what I'd told myself. But grief has a way of messing with your head, blurring the timeline, softening the sharp edges of what you thought you knew. So I decided to dig. Late at night, after Mia was tucked in and fast asleep, I pulled Daniel's old laptop out of the closet. It had been sitting in its padded case on the bottom shelf, untouched since the week he passed. I hadn't had the heart to even look at it, let alone turn it on. But now, I needed answers. I typed in the password, his favorite baseball team and the year we got married, and held my breath. The screen flickered to life like it had been waiting for me all this time. Hundreds of emails loaded up, perfectly preserved, a digital time capsule of our life. I filtered by sender, typing in Vanessa's name with shaky fingers. Most of what popped up was boring stuff. Birthday reminders, quick check-ins, links to articles she thought were funny. But then a subject line stopped me cold. Granny's finances, not adding up. I clicked, my heart racing. The email was from 4 months before Grandma Rose passed. Vanessa was laying into Daniel, pushing him hard for access to the estate documents. I'm just saying, if something's going to be changed, we should know before it's too late. She's not getting any younger, she wrote. There was another one, a few weeks later. Daniel, don't you think it's strange Clara's always around when Grandma signs something? That's not how this should be handled. And then another, this one sharper, more desperate. If Clara gets her name on that will again, you'll regret it. She's playing the long game. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen, rereading her words until they burned into my brain. Vanessa had been planting seeds of doubt in Daniel's mind, trying to drive a wedge between us long before Grandma was gone. Before Daniel was gone. All this time I'd been painted as the manipulator, but it was her. She was the one pulling strings. I printed everything. Every email, every thread, every timestamp. My hands were trembling, but I wasn't done yet. Just as I was about to close the laptop, one last email caught my eye. It was unread, sitting in Daniel's inbox like a ghost. It was from Grandma Rose, sent 2 weeks before she passed. Daniel, I want Clara to have everything. She's the only one who visits me, who listens. Vanessa only asks about the money. I'm tired. My throat closed up, tears stinging my eyes. I remembered that day so clearly, helping Grandma with her sweater, pouring her tea, sitting by the window with the garden view, her hand holding mine just a little longer than usual. She'd known. She'd seen right through Vanessa's act. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about honoring what was real, what was true. Vanessa could spin her stories, hire her fancy PR firms and high-powered lawyers, but she couldn't erase Grandma's words. And now I had proof. The caregiver's name was Lorraine. She'd been with Grandma Rose for nearly a year before she passed, stopping by twice a week to help with meds, tidy up, and whip up meals. I only had a fuzzy memory of her. Quiet, polite, the kind of person who fades into the background. Back then, I was so caught up with Daniel's illness that I barely noticed anyone else. But now, I needed what she knew. I dug up her number from an old group text buried in my phone. When I called and explained who I wasn't sure she'd even want to talk. To my surprise, she agreed to meet me the next morning at a cozy little coffee shop near the assisted living center. She got there 10 minutes early. Lorraine looked older than I remembered, her curly gray hair swept into a neat bun, her hands shaking just a bit as she stirred her tea. But her eyes? Sharp as ever. I was wondering when someone would ask, she said before I could even get a word out. Ask what? I said, leaning forward. She leaned in too, her voice low. If something about your grandmother's passing felt off, I've been carrying it for a while. A chill ran down my spine. I don't want trouble, she went on. I really don't. But I keep notes. Always have. I've seen too many families rip each other apart over money, and I wasn't about to let my name get dragged into the mess. I sat there, barely breathing. Lorraine reached into her purse and pulled out a small, beat-up notebook. I wrote things down, just in case. She flipped to a page dated 3 weeks before Grandma Rose passed. Vanessa showed up today, unannounced, asked to speak with Mrs. Benson alone, refused to let me stay in the room, said it's just family. Later that night, Mrs. Benson seemed upset, told me she felt cornered, cried during her bath, said she missed Clara. My throat tightened, a lump forming fast. She only came twice, Lorraine said softly. But both times she brought papers. I don't know what they were. But after the second visit, your grandmother stopped eating as much, said she didn't feel safe. Why didn't you report it? I asked, my voice barely steady. I did, she said, pulling out a copy of a formal incident report. I sent it to the facility's supervisor, but nothing happened. Vanessa was listed as her family contact. They said she had rights. I stared at the paper in my hands, my heart pounding. Vanessa hadn't just been whispering lies behind my back. She'd gone straight to Grandma Rose, alone in secret, and tried to pressure her one last time. But it didn't work. Grandma still changed her will. She still left everything to me and Mia, and now I had a witness. Lorraine, I said, my voice slow but firm. Would you be willing to testify if this goes to trial? She looked down at her tea, then back at me, her eyes steady. For your grandmother? Yes, I would. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, the weight of everything finally starting to shift. Vanessa might have started this fight in the shadows, behind closed doors, but I was opening those doors one by one. And what was waiting inside? It wasn't going to save her. It was a Thursday evening, and I was still reeling from my meeting with Lorraine. Mia had just gotten home from school, tossing her backpack by the door before vanishing into her room. I was in the kitchen trying to focus on chopping veggies for dinner, but my mind kept spiraling, replaying Lorraine's words, the notebook, the incident report. I was so lost in thought I didn't even notice my phone was gone until Mia's voice cut through. Mom? She called, stepping slowly into the kitchen. She looked pale, her eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. What's wrong, baby? I asked, my heart already starting to race. She held out my phone like it was something dangerous. You forgot to hang up. I blinked, confused. What? I think your phone dialed someone. I didn't mean to listen, but I heard a voice. I heard her. I grabbed the phone from her hands, my fingers trembling. The call had ended, but the screen showed a blocked number. Unknown. What did you hear? I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. Mia bit her lip, hesitating. Then she whispered, It was Aunt Vanessa. My stomach plummeted. She was laughing, Mia said, her voice small. But it wasn't real laughing. It was cold. She said something about making you crack under pressure. And she said, Mia looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. She said, It doesn't matter what Clara finds. By the time she shows her hand, the court will already believe mine. My whole body went still, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Vanessa wasn't just building a case. She was crafting a whole narrative, perfectly timed to tear down everything I had left. I crouched down to Mia's level, looking her in the eyes. Sweetheart, are you okay? Did anything she said scare you? She nodded, just once, her voice barely a whisper. She said you were weak, but I don't think you are. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, her little heartbeat thumping against me. I'm not weak, baby, I said softly. I'm just tired of pretending love always wins. Because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes love gets crushed under lies, power, and entitlement masquerading as grief. But that moment with Mia flipped a switch in me. If Vanessa was willing to scheme, to threaten, to drag my daughter into this mess just to win, she'd crossed a line. I wasn't going to just sit back and defend myself anymore. I was done playing nice. I was going to fight back, proactively, strategically, and if I had to, ruthlessly. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was about protecting my daughter, our peace, and the truth Vanessa thought she could bury. The courtroom was packed that next morning, every seat filled, every whisper buzzing with anticipation. I could feel every pair of eyes on me as I took my seat, but I didn't shrink back. Not this time. Mia was safe at home with our neighbor Rebecca, the one person I trusted to keep things normal for her. I didn't want her here, didn't want this day etched into her memory as something she'd carry into adulthood. But I carried her with me. Her strength, her heart, in every word I was ready to say, every breath I took. The judge flipped through the documents one last time, his eyes scanning the pages before he looked up at Vanessa. "Ms. Bennett," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Do you have anything to add before we close?" Vanessa stood, her voice softer now, but not genuine. It was calculated, like she was playing a part. "I was just trying to protect my family," she said, her words hanging in the air. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to me. "Ms. Dalton?" I stood, my hands steady, no notes needed. "I don't want vengeance," I said, my voice clear. "I want peace, but I also want clarity. I want it said, right here in this room, that love isn't weakness. Showing up for someone doesn't make you manipulative, and silence, when it's used to erase someone's truth, is its own kind of violence." I looked at Vanessa, not with anger, but with release, like I was finally letting go of the weight I'd been carrying. The judge leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "This isn't just a matter of legality," he said at last. "This is a matter of intent. It's clear to this court that Mrs. Dalton acted with care, consistency, and compassion. It's equally clear that Ms. Bennett attempted to undermine the deceased's wishes through indirect pressure and strategic positioning." He paused, letting the words settle. It's rare in probate court to see so much emotion, but it's also rare to see such courage. My breath caught in my throat. "This court upholds the will of Rose Benson in its entirety," he continued. "All assets, including the estate, shall remain with Clara Dalton and her daughter Mia." I closed my eyes, the words washing over me. They weren't just a legal ruling. They were validation for every sleepless night, every moment I doubted myself, every time I wanted to scream but held it together. Then the judge added, almost gently, "And may this resolution bring more than clarity. May it bring healing." Vanessa stormed out before the paperwork was even signed, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. I didn't chase her. I didn't need her to understand anymore. That wasn't my job. I walked out of that courtroom with the truth in my hands and peace in my heart. I didn't throw a big celebration after the verdict. No champagne, no calls to relatives to gloat. It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt still. For the first time in months, maybe even years, there was this quiet calm. The air in our house felt lighter. Mia started sleeping through the night again. I caught myself humming in the kitchen without even realizing it. The silence that used to choke me had turned into something almost sacred. That weekend, Mia and I planted flowers in the backyard. Lavender, Grandma Rose's favorite. Mia helped me dig, carefully lining each pot with smooth white stones. "Do you think she'd like them?" she asked, brushing dirt off her hands. I looked at the little purple blooms swaying in the breeze and nodded. "I think she'd love them." We didn't talk about Vanessa. Not out of fear, but because some things don't need to be dragged back up once they're buried. I chose peace over resentment. That's the harder choice, I've learned, but it's worth it. 3 months later, a letter showed up. No return address, just familiar handwriting, shakier than I remembered. My heart tightened as I read the first line. I'm sorry. It was from Eric, my brother. The one who'd sat silent during the will reading, who'd taken Vanessa's side by doing nothing at all. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. He wrote, I was grieving too. But I let my grief turn into avoidance. I didn't want to see what Vanessa was doing. I didn't want to believe she could be cruel. But watching you stand up for yourself in court, it woke something in me. I'm not asking for a relationship, not yet. But I hope one day Mia will know her uncle. And maybe you'll let me show you I'm not who I was in that room. I read the letter 3 times, not because I needed to decide anything right away, but because it reminded me that healing doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it slips in quietly, in a shaky handwritten note. Sometimes the most unexpected person takes a small step toward the light. I didn't write back right away. Some wounds need time to close. Some forgiveness needs space to grow. But that letter, it didn't reopen the past. It planted something new, like the lavender blooming outside our window. It was a cloudy afternoon when it arrived. Mia was sprawled at the dining table, lost in her coloring books, while I sifted through the usual pile of bills and junk mail. Then I saw it. An envelope with Grandma Rose's unmistakable cursive. My heart stopped dead in its tracks. It was postmarked 3 weeks before she passed, sent from her lawyer's office with a note. To be delivered after the finalization of all estate matters. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of her lavender-scented stationery, covered in her familiar, elegant handwriting. My dear Clara, it began, if you're reading this, the dust has settled. You've walked through a storm I wish I could have shielded you from. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. But I need you to know. I saw everything. The way you cared for Daniel. The way you protected Mia. The way you stood alone even when your own family turned away. That is legacy. Not money, not names on deeds. Legacy is the love you give when it's hardest. Legacy is truth, spoken softly but with strength. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. I left something for Mia, too. A little box tucked inside my sewing cabinet. It holds pieces of our family that deserve to be remembered. Not the pain, but the strength. Share it with her when you're ready. And when you do, remind her. We come from women who survive storms, but more importantly, we come from women who plant gardens after they pass. I folded the letter, pressing it to my chest like I could hold her words closer to my heart. That night, I found the box exactly where she said it would be. Inside were old photographs, a tiny gold locket, and a journal filled with Grandma Rose's handwritten stories, family stories, her stories, stories of resilience and quiet courage. Mia sat next to me, cradling the locket like it was the most precious thing she'd ever touched. Was she scared? She asked, her voice small. I shook my head. No, sweetheart. She was ready, because she knew we'd be okay. And for the first time, I truly believed it. I wasn't broken. I was forged. Not by betrayal, but by truth. By grace, by the quiet strength of women like Grandma Rose, passed down through generations. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever found healing in the places you least expected, welcome to our little corner of stories about hidden family battles and the peace that follows. Share where you're reading from, drop a comment about what moved you, and stick around for more stories that remind us. Sometimes revenge is loud, but the best revenge? It's the peace you build after the storm,